Hey there good people, it's your Crippled Critic, and this week I want to talk about the new demo for Resident Evil 2 the Remake. If you've been following my channel for a while, you'll know that I love horror games, and especially Resident Evil. The original Resident Evil 2 on the PlayStation 1 was by far my favorite game in the series, and as soon as I heard they were doing a remake, I knew I had to play it. Still, there's a myriad of ways they could have messed it up, especially when trying to update the controls for modern audiences. So, I'm glad that I got a chance to check out the demo for the game just to see if I could even play it. Thankfully, I think it's doable for disabled gamers, but I'll get into that in a second. Yeah, so if you didn't know, Capcom released a demo for Resident Evil 2 Remake last week, and the game is coming out in a few weeks. The way they handled the demo was a little strange. It's not like a lot of demos where you can just play a certain part of the game for a little bit and then it's over. No, this is a demo where you can play as much of the game as you want, but only in a 30-minute amount of time. After that, you can't play anything at all. A weird approach, but that's Capcom. I didn't mind too much because 30 minutes was just enough time to give me some insight into the controls and gameplay. And that's really what I'm going to be focusing on in this video, just the accessibility options and gameplay of Resident Evil 2 Remake, because I won't be able to really get a close look at the atmosphere and the music. So let me get into it. First off, there's some nice accessibility features in the options menu. Capcom is honestly one of the few Japanese companies in the industry that keeps consistent accessibility options in their games, like colorblind options and options for hearing impaired. It's nice to see them continue that trend. For disabled gamers with fine motor skill impairment, there are 4 different presets in the control settings. Most of the differences have to do with the back trigger buttons in R3 and L3. I was a little disappointed that the controls weren't completely customizable, but with a little tweaking I made it work. What was weirder to me is that I could have sworn Capcom announced in a press release earlier that there would be at least 2 different playstyles for the gameplay in Resident Evil 2. One being a more classic playstyle, like in Resident Evil 4 and 5, where the camera is being controlled by just the left control stick, with the aiming being the same way, while the other playstyle would be closer to what a modern interpretation of what we'd expect the third-person shooter would play like. And even though I see 4 different presets available to change in the control settings, none of them really justify calling them a different playstyle. They're just slight variations on the same controls. So I wonder if that's something Capcom plans to release in the full game. So the gameplay style in Resident Evil 2 Remake is an over-the-shoulder third-person shooter. You move with the left control stick and aim with the right, unlike the old game that had fixed cameras and tank controls. I know a lot of fans were worried that because they were changing to an over-the-shoulder viewpoint, the game was going to be more like Resident Evil 4 and 5, but when I played it, it didn't really feel like either of those. The closest this game feels like is the more recent Resident Evil Revelation series, which is like a mix of old and new playstyles. Resident Evil 2 Remake tends to use almost all the buttons on the controller. The trigger buttons are used for aiming and shooting, the D-pad is used to change weapons, X is interact, circle lets you do a quick turn, and triangle is inventory. I definitely had to use the default PlayStation 4 accessibility customizable options button just to get the controls to my liking, but it was doable. There's no option to make the camera follow your movement, so you have to move it manually. This was a bummer for me because it's hard for gamers with fine motor skill impairments to already have to move quickly during action scenes and running away from enemies. Then on top of it you have to control the camera. They haven't had this option since Resident Evil 5, but I do think they should bring it back. There's a run feature that can be toggled off and on, but there's kind of a problem with it. When I think toggling, I expect that you press the button once and then you run automatically, but that's not really how this worked. When I turned the toggle on, I started moving and running, and then as soon as I stopped, the toggle stopped. I had to press the button each time I started running. It kind of defeats the purpose of having a run button that's automatic, so I ended up just holding the button down anyway. It honestly felt more like a glitch. I guess I'll try and bring it to Capcom to Tencent to the best of my ability, because I really think this toggle is needlessly tedious. I know it can be done because they had it in Resident Evil Revelations 2, so hopefully Capcom will fix the problem in the full game. So when I got to some of the combat portions of the demo, I started to get a little worried that I wouldn't be able to play the game. Even though I had aim assist on, it really wasn't doing anything. I would try and aim in the general vicinity of an enemy, but the aiming reticle wouldn't move at all unless I did. On top of that, the demo doesn't offer you any other difficulty mode but one, which I assume is normal. You aren't given any healing items in the beginning of the demo, and this time around, zombies take a lot more bullets. I was starting to notice that I was getting overwhelmed very quickly by zombies, and this was going to be a lot tougher than I thought. Thankfully, something happened that helped once I died for the first time. When I died and clicked continue, the game offered an assistive mode that would help with easier difficulty. This assistive mode offered help that regenerated quicker, zombies that were a little weaker, and an aim assist. The aim assist offer was a little weird because I already clicked aim assist in the options menu before I started, but it did help tremendously. With this assistive mode, the aim assist actually worked. It locked onto enemies pretty easily, and I was able to destroy enemies a lot faster and without losing my life. I'm glad it's there. It was a little weird that it wasn't labeled very clearly and you had to access it by dying. Hopefully it's just something they did for the demo. Still, it's something I thought you guys would want to know about. One thing I was very happy to realize was the flashlight in this game turns on automatically when you go in dark areas, which is nice. I always hate when games make a designated flashlight button because it's just pointless to me when you can just have it turn on automatically, so this is a nice feature they added and I'm glad. Also, when you access the inventory, it pauses the game like in the old original games. Hell yes! No more of this having to access your items during combat like in Resident Evil 5, 6, and 7. We're back to basics and I think it works. I don't know a whole lot about the puzzles in this game. I only got to one, which was in the first hallway in the police station. They seemed pretty straightforward. None of them were timed, which is good. There was only one quick time event I got to, and it was in a hallway with a bookshelf that I had to move. What was cool was that I didn't have to tap a button really quickly, I just had to hold it down. This will be great if all the quick time events are like that, but I guess we'll see. Visually speaking, the game is dark, like very dark, like hard to see even in the light. I never usually have to fiddle with the contrast and brightness feature, and I have pretty good vision, so I can't imagine for gamers with visual impairments. Resident Evil 2 Remake has two separate scales for the brightness options, maximum brightness and minimum brightness. It's not that hard to figure out, but it definitely took me a little longer to get it to my liking. So I think it's just something I think visual impaired people will want to know about. It also seemed like the game got a lot brighter when it was during cinematic cutscenes as opposed to when you were just running around the game. Colorblind players will be happy because they give you the option to change the color of the aiming reticle, which is cool, and I'm always happy when Capcom keeps that function. Lastly, there's options for the hearing impaired and deaf players. Like I always say, horror games tend to use sound to immerse you into the atmosphere, so it's somewhat expected that deaf players won't get the same experience. The Resident Evil 2 Remake is no exception to this. There are subtitles available for the dialogue in the game, which is nice, but man, if any game needed captions, it's this game. There were so many moments during combat where I would hear a crash behind me or a window break to let me know a zombie was coming. Deaf players will have no idea. It will definitely ramp up the horror and surprise for them, and I'm not saying it's inaccessible for deaf players, but it will be a lot harder. Capcom came up with some really fun and innovative ways to help deaf players in Resident Evil 7 with the phone icon to let them hear it off screen. So I know they can do that. I hope they think more about that in the future. So that's all I really noticed about accessibility in the demo. Keep in mind it is a demo and things could change drastically for the controls and options when the full game is released. I also remember that when the Resident Evil 7 demos were released, there were a bunch of options that were added in the full game, so I'm definitely optimistic this will happen again. Still, I thought it was important for disabled gamers to see some of these options and what's available and what might not be. That assistive mode is going to be my lifesaver to play this game because the combat looks pretty hard, but the assistive mode is in there. I think I'll be alright. I'm really excited to play the full game. I can't wait, man. I love Resident Evil 2, so hopefully it'll be great. Alright, you guys. Thank you for watching. Are you guys excited for the Resident Evil 2 remake? Do you like what you see? What do you think of the new playstyle? Let me know in the comment section below. I appreciate you guys watching. Look forward to new content in the next few weeks. And as always, I will see you later.